So a couple of weeks ago, one of my favourite YouTubers called Rick Beato put out a video called "Are Songwriters Running Out of Ideas?" And this sounded like a really interesting topic to talk about, and I'm always interested to hear Rick's opinions on things like this. And I decided to not watch it straight away and to actually, when I eventually got round to it, film a bit of a reaction video to this because I would like to hear what he has to say about it and also just give a little bit of a commentary on kind of like how I perceive it as well. And, it might be the case that I agree with everything he says, it might be the case that I don't, but this is the first time I've ever watched this video, so I am going to play it live right here and give you my opinion and my commentary on this particular topic as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in and get started. Alright, so let's hit play here.
You guys have heard the term hook. I've used it many times referring to songs, and I'm usually talking about the chorus, but I'm actually talking about the lyric as well. Historically, the hook was just a single line repeated 2 or 4 times. That's how songs were written for decades. Pop songs, rock songs, you name it, country songs, they were written with one line repeated over and over in the chorus. Let me give you an example. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's quite an interesting thing, actually. I've been going through a book called The Art of Songwriting, I think by an author called Dan Bell. It's a really great book, and what he mentions there about the hook line being both a melody but also potentially a lyric as well is a very key thing that comes up in that book, about the fact that you can have this repeating idea, whether it be a melody or simply just like a snippet of a lyric, and repeating it over and over again becomes a hook. And a very key and interesting thing it pointed out there is that simply repeating something can turn, a melody or a lyric into a hook, because, repetition is, something that people are going to start remembering.
Another one. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a
I love this song.
ride. She's got a ticket to ride. Let it be, let it be.
It's quite interesting that you pointed that out, actually, about the Beatles specifically, because they clearly did have some kind of formula, some kind of go-to formula that they went to, and it's not that they necessarily were even aware that they had that formula that they always went to. They just knew that it worked, and it was probably more of a subconscious thing. It's a really interesting thing to read about the Beatles and their songwriting style, and also with Paul McCartney in particular, who has said in the past that he has no idea where his songs come from. And I think that's the case for a lot of songwriters, that they don't really know how these songs are actually created, why it is that they've got this skill or this talent, and really it pretty much just comes down to the fact that they have practiced it a lot and they have exercised that creative muscle in their brain. That is literally what it comes down to.
I can't get no. Once again, repeating those hook lines over and over. Children, it's just a shot away, just a shot away. Children.
Love this song as well.
Not only rock bands, but folk artists like Bob Dylan, for example. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
It's quite interesting that he's using like lots of different song examples here, but so far in the video he does seem to actually be pulling from a very particular era of music, particularly like the 60s, really, the 60s and the 70s. And it's actually quite interesting that, a lot of music back then seemed to use this kind of like formula, this way of songwriting. And nowadays, especially when it came to like the 2000s, I think, there seems to be more of a push towards popular music actually being kind of unconventional. You know, during kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of like popular music that was coming out that didn't necessarily have these formulas of using hook lines and things like that. If you think about bands like Radiohead and even Coldplay, you know, a lot of their stuff that became really popular wasn't necessarily conventional songwriting with lots of hook lines and things like that. So it seems that modern music was very much in a way moving away from this kind of thing and more towards you know, more like experimental stuff. Now, you know, I'm not saying, I'm not going to draw a line in the sand and say that, you know, everything changed from that point. Obviously, you know, even going back to like the 70s, 80s and everything like that, there were lots of unconventional songs. If you think of Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, obviously that came out in the 70s, and you know, that's one of the most unconventional rock songs ever written, but also one of the most famous. But it is interesting that as music has actually developed and as people's tastes have developed over the years, you know, this way of songwriting and using hook lines and things like that isn't necessarily you know, what people are after.
Bands like Led Zeppelin, one of their biggest songs. Want a whole lot of love.
Never been keen on this song.
Love. 4 times. Owner of a lonely heart.
Oh yeah.
Owner of a broken heart. AC/DC, oh my god. Their songs, that's their whole formula is that. Yeah, you shook me all night long. Perfect example. Yes, I'm back. Yes, I'm back. I'm back in black. Yes, I'm back in black. That is the hook. The whole chorus is constructed of elongated versions of those 3 words. What about the Police? Roxanne? Not only does it have one hook line that repeats over and over, in the chorus it actually has 2 hook lines that repeat over and over that overlap. I probably come up with 25 Sting songs that have that same thing, repeating the hook over and over.
So far, I mean, he's been giving lots and lots of song examples. And it's nice to actually see that he's doing it from lots of different eras and lots of different bands and things like that as well. And yeah, he's making like a very clear point that, you know, loads of famous songs clearly do use like a particular formula. You know, they do use a hook formula. And the reason that, you know, we remember them and the reason that you can just pluck them out the air and sing along to them, you know, even after like months or years of not hearing it, is because that's what it is. It's a hook, it's a repeating line, it's something that literally gets embedded in your mind.
Now, as you get into the 90s, later 90s, early 2000s, you started to get less and less of these single line hooks.
How weird is that? First time watching this, he literally just said exactly what I said earlier in the video. But it is so true. Like when, you know, music started to move into that era, into like what is now the modern era of music, it did start to die out, that kind of like hook line formula of writing, and you know, it became more kind of like free flowing, if that's the best way to describe it. You know, not using conventional even verse choruses and things like that. You know, one of Coldplay's most famous songs, Clocks, it doesn't even have a chorus. And they even said, I think the record company or something like that said that this would not be a hit. You know, they wanted to release it as a single. They said it wouldn't be a hit because it has no chorus. It doesn't really have a hook, apart from that little ooh, ah, that little vocal line. So people's tastes had really kind of like developed and moved on by that point, I think. And, you know, people were open to not just constantly being blasted with, you know, hooky verse chorus songs.
You still found them. There weren't many in nu metal, very few in nu metal. But in pop songwriting, the style began to change. Songs like Firework by Katy Perry, Since You've Been Gone by Kelly Clarkson, they would have these more complex choruses that had multiple lines or multiple sections. You still had songs like Gnarls Barkley, Crazy, or Outkast, Hey Ya, or as choruses became more complex and you had to have these multiple section choruses. That just became the style, that you would have an A, B, A, C, and then maybe a B part of the chorus. You'd have to keep people's attention by constantly changing the hooks. You couldn't go with the simple hook line.
That's an interesting point he's made there. So it sounds to me like what he's suggesting is that the reason that songs were starting to be written with more complexity, with more changes, with even more hook lines packed into a single song is because perhaps people's attention span had actually changed, and they weren't even willing to just to just listen to just one hook. I mean, it's an interesting point, and it could be true. It could be true, but the famous like hooky songs of the 60s, of the 70s and everything like that, people today, people my age still love them and will still listen to them. So I don't know whether I completely agree with what he said there, but I'm not going to say that it isn't true. It's just something that I'm not too sure I completely resonate with in that sense.
I thought about this a lot. Maybe it's that we've run out of good hooks to use. I'd like to know your thoughts. Put it in the comments. Tell me what other songs do this. There's so many of them, but whatever comes to mind, put them in there. And let me know of other songs that were big hits over the last 10 years that actually use the single line hook. That's all for now. Please subscribe.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that question. I don't think there's like a clear-cut answer to it necessarily. I'm sure that there are plenty of songs out there that still use that formula and, use hook lines and things like that. But it does seem that in this modern era of music, people don't actually necessarily need that, or, they're looking for more unconventional songwriting, like he was mentioning there. Whether it's for the reasons that he said, because, potentially people's attention spans aren't as long as they used to be. I don't know. That could be true, especially in this like day of social media and everything like that. But it is an interesting thing. Like when you look at what is popular nowadays, and looking at whether there is actually music out there that uses that type of formula. An example that I can think of is like Imagine Dragons, for example. A lot of their music does tend to use like very hooky lines. Think of the song Radioactive. Radioactive, radioactive. That is absolutely like a hook line in that song. That song came out a few years ago now, but there are plenty of songs in their discography that still do use that formula. I'm just gonna like delve in a little bit deeper into this and have a look, because I've got my Apple Music open here, and I know that there's a song that came out this week by Miley Cyrus called Midnight Sky. That is as you can see, like quite a popular song here, and I just want to have a quick listen to it just to see how it is that this song has been written. So after listening to that, that's the first time I've heard it, and it is quite interesting that song and that chorus that it has in there does actually use a formula that he mentioned in that video, where it has more of like an A B A kind of chorus. So it has this melody that goes oh no, and then it has another section with a higher melody that is kind of like another kind of like hook essentially, and then it finishes off with the same of the previous two. So it's interesting just pulling something straight out of a brand new song and actually seeing that it's not really using that hook line formula that was so common back in the 60s and the 70s. It is actually using one of those more complex structured choruses that Rick was mentioning there. Now, obviously, that is just one example, and going through loads of different examples would make this video way too long. But ultimately, to answer that original question, do I think that the hook has completely died out? Do I think that we've just simply run out of them? I don't think, like, personally, you can ever run out of, music and, musical ideas, and, that includes hook lines as well. I just think that is pretty much impossible. There's so many different things that you can do with music, with lyrics and everything like that. You're never going to run out of it, essentially. It's just that I think people's tastes have developed, people's, inspirations have changed, artists' inspirations have changed. It just seems to be one of those things where we perceive that type of music and that type of writing as being, from that era, and perhaps using that songwriting style, it just sounds a bit dated now. It's just not what people are really listening to. Or really looking for in modern music. Yeah, you can absolutely go back and listen to that music, and obviously, many people do. But at the same time, it's just not how music really is written nowadays. And I just think that's because people's tastes have changed, and that it's going to develop again. It's going to develop again in the next like 20, 30 years, and we'll look back at this time with this way of songwriting, and no doubt think that's dated as well. So. It's just the way things go, I think. But really interesting video from Rick. I did enjoy hearing his opinion on that and seeing all the song examples that he has and everything like that. Didn't 100% agree with all of the points that he made, and obviously that's completely fine. Absolutely go and subscribe to his channel though, if you haven't, because he puts out some brilliant content. And yeah, I will leave it there for today, and if you have enjoyed this video, then please do hit the like button, and if you would like more content like this, specifically around things like songwriting, then also hit the subscribe button as well, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.